car polish that cleans and protects for 6 months or more. Wipe it on, wipe it off. Illuminate is not a wax, but a formula used for years in aviation to protect aircraft. Its slick surface protects against scratches, bird droppings, grease, and grime. Order now and receive a second bottle free. Make that faded car look like new with Illuminate. Your satisfaction is guaranteed.
This is CNN.
A Texas town plunged into grief by yesterday's massacre. The gunshots echo on Capitol Hill today during debate over new crime legislation and the annual increase in Social Security checks. Welcome to NewsHour. I'm Bobbie Battista in Atlanta. Reed Collins is off today. On Capitol Hill, supporters of gun control are using yesterday's massacre in Colleen, Texas as ammunition for their battle. The House is debating its version of a wide-ranging anti-crime bill, and part of that bill would clamp down on some semi-automatic weapons. CNN's Deborah Potter is following that debate on Capitol Hill, and she joins us now live. Deborah?
Well, as you say, Bobbie, the provisions being debated today, one of them at least, deals specifically with assault weapons. However, the gun that was used in Colleen would not be covered. The sponsors, however, are saying that there is a significant portion of the bill that would affect crimes like this, and that's a measure that would ban clips containing more than 7 rounds. They're saying at least that would have slowed the gunman down in the Texas massacres. Opponents say that this bill really does not address the problem of preventing crime, but supporters are using the massacre in Texas as an argument for action.
Today we'll have an opportunity to do something. There'll be an amendment offered later today to strike from the crime bill a section which has been in there to ban the manufacture, sale, and importation of 13 kinds of semi-automatic assault weapons. I only say to my colleagues, and I realize the difficulty of the issue, we have before us an opportunity to do something good for America and to save some lives.
We're rendering our citizenry, the honest citizenry of this country, defenseless by taking away their only means of defense. I think the underlying problem hasn't really been stated in here, but it needs to be stated, and that is that the majority of people in this body don't really believe that punishment is a deterrent to crime.
Supporters of the assault weapons ban say they really don't yet have the votes to pass it, but they're clearly hoping that the massacre in Texas will swing some votes their way. The assault weapons ban is not the only controversial part of this bill that's coming up for debate today. Also on the floor, a conservative effort to limit the right of appeal by convicted criminals. The House already has changed the bill somewhat to add more crimes to the list that would be subject to the death penalty. And that includes killings that result from a reckless disregard for human life. The opinion of the sponsors is that that would be assistance in stopping drive-by shootings. So the bill will not, in fact, be finally voted on today. That's likely to happen next week. And even then, the bill will be a long way from becoming law. The Senate already has passed its version that would cost about 3 times as much as the bill now on the House floor. So that still has to be reconciled before the bill could be sent on for a presidential signature. Deborah Potter, CNN Live on Capitol Hill.
Well, police in Colleen, Texas say they are still trying to piece together the tragic puzzle of the nation's worst shooting spree, but so far, they still don't know what drove a gunman to shoot down 22 people at a cafeteria yesterday. The police chief says investigators have discovered some clues at the home of George Hennard, the man identified as the gunman, but he refused to release details. 10 minutes after it started, the rampage ended when Hennard shot and killed himself. The 35-year-old former merchant marine was unemployed. Neighbors describe him as rude, known to scream at them and spit at their cars, and they say they were afraid of him. The police chief says Hennard was heavily armed when he smashed his pickup truck into the window of Luby's restaurant.
The weapons that were used, the individual had 2 firearms with him, both 9mm semi-automatics. One was a Ruger P89, which holds 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Another was a Glock 17, which holds 17 rounds, 1 in the chamber. He had a total of 3 magazines per weapon in his possession.
Residents held a candlelight vigil last night to remember the victims of the massacre. Flags in Colleen are flying at half-staff today. Workers from Luby's cafeteria got together with executives from the restaurant this morning. CNN's Tony Clark joins us now with details. Tony?
Bobbie, it has been a very sad time for those workers. There was one good piece of news that the workers heard today. One of their fellow employees, Mark Matthews, a 19 or 20-year-old employee who was working at the cafeteria yesterday when the shooting occurred. People saw him leave, but at that candlelight vigil that we saw earlier, people were worried. They didn't know where he was. Well, they found him about 9 o'clock, 8 or 9 this morning, Central Time. He had been hiding in the dishwasher, the big industrial dishwasher that is here at the cafeteria, hiding there, afraid to come out all night long, and is apparently, according to the police chief and according to Luby's officials, apparently in good health. Luby's has set up a $100,000 trust fund for the victims, the families of the victims, and Pete Urban, he is the CEO, the chief executive officer of Luby's, met with reporters a short time ago to tell them of the sympathy that he and the corporation have for the victims of the shooting.
Let me start with saying that all of us at Luby's extend our condolences and our heartfelt sympathy to the families and friends of those who were killed or injured in this senseless tragedy. In the face of such mindless violence, I can only add my own sense of personal grief and my absolute assurance that we are making every effort to help the victims and their families.
About 45 employees of the Luby's cafeteria met with corporate officials, psychologists, and the others today to both hear what they had to say, to get condolences, reassurances about the future. There are no plans at this point about what will happen to the cafeteria. Some people have said that this location ought to be closed, as the McDonald's was in California after a shooting, but the officials said that a decision hasn't been made. As for the workers, this is a very difficult time. One worker told us she felt like everyone that went there was a friend.
I was standing there and I heard this explosion, and I turned around to see what it was, and I saw glass flying, and this truck came through. He just pulled his gun out and started shooting, and I got down and crawled to the back of the kitchen and ran out through the back door. It's like, it was just slow motion. It was so slow. And I couldn't get out of there. It seemed like I just couldn't get out of there fast enough.
The employees who were there at the time of the shooting said they felt fortunate to be alive today. Now they are comforting each other and trying to understand the reasons behind yesterday's shooting. I'm Tony Clark, CNN, reporting live from Colleen.
In other news, 2 new government reports bear troubling news for the nation's economy. Consumer prices for September jumped 0.4%. That is the largest monthly increase since January. The inflation rate rose sharply despite slow economic growth. At the same time, the U.S. trade deficit soared 13.6% in August to nearly $7 billion. That is the biggest gap between U.S. imports and exports since January. And if it continues at that same rate, the U.S. would be running almost $100 billion in the red for the year. The country's 43 million Social Security recipients will find a disappointing check in their mailboxes come January. They will find the smallest cost of living raise in 5 years, only 3.7%, or an average of $22 a month. Brush fires are burning out of control near Spokane, Washington. Flames have destroyed at least 75 homes and buildings. 1 firefighter is confirmed dead, and officials say they fear for the lives of 4 missing residents. Some of the fires were caused by sparks from power lines down by the gusting winds that now are spreading the flames. The fires have blackened some 30,000 acres of brush and timber near Spokane alone. Wind-blown fires also are burning in parts of Idaho. The Navy reportedly has reversed its decision on the cause of the 1989 USS Iowa explosion that killed 47 sailors. A new Navy investigation apparently could not pinpoint the cause of the blast, and it could have been an accident. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Frank Kelso is expected to apologize at this hour to the family of the man it blamed for the explosion in the ship's gun turret. He was 24-year-old gunner's mate Clayton Hartwig, who also died in the blast. The Navy had alleged that he planted an explosive device between gunpowder bags. The music industry is mourning the death of country western singer Tennessee Ernie Ford. Ford died at Reston Hospital Center in Virginia after a long battle with a liver disease. He was 72. The singer's bass voice was heard weekly on his TV variety shows in the 1950s and 60s. He recorded more than 80 albums in his career and was best known for his song 16 Tons, a tribute to blue-collar workers. Just ahead on NewsHour, Secretary of State James Baker and the final push for a Middle East peace conference. Also a deadly collision in France involving a passenger train bound for Paris. Later, life insurance benefits paid out before policyholders die. And a report about sugar and stress.
Bay's English Muffins proudly presents a symphony of flavors your family will applaud. Bay's English Muffins. They bring your favorite ingredients into perfect harmony every time. In your grocer's dairy case, Bay's.
Along with the glaciers, a string quartet. There are eagles and old world antiques. Midnight sun, Rosenthal china, the finest service, and the spouting of whales. Surely there is no land on earth more magnificent and wild than Alaska, and no way more civilized to see it than aboard the ships of Holland America, the world's best cruise line.
A kiss? No, I'm sorry. I don't think so.
Oh, no, please, no, baby, no.
Oh, not a good idea. Not now.
No, bad time.
Fight morning breath with Scope. Scope has 2 powerful ingredients that kill 90% of the bacteria that cause morning breath.
Your kiss is ready. Pucker up.
Right on the kisser.
Come on.
Kiss morning breath goodbye with Scope.
Give me that kiss.
Gentlemen, in preparing our...
Are you finding it harder and harder to get home in time to watch the evening news? Then you should know about the network that gives you news when you need it. A network made for people on the go. And because it's there all the time,
Mom, do you think this is such a good idea?
it lets you take your time.
And that's the news. Good night.
CNN Headline News. The latest news, business, and sports around the clock.
Officials in France say a freight train failed to heed a stop signal in the early morning collision with a passenger train that left at least 16 dead. At least 50 are reported injured. The passenger train was approaching Paris on a run from Nice when the freight train crossed into its path. Rescue workers spent hours pulling casualties from the mangled wreckage. Secretary of State James Baker is holding peace conference talks in Jerusalem with top Israeli officials. Baker met twice today with Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, who is described by reports as still concerned at the prospect of negotiating with Syria and the Palestinians. However, unidentified Israeli officials are quoted as saying Israel will attend the conference that Baker hopes to convene this month. Meanwhile, Israeli security forces fired tear gas at Palestinian demonstrators in the occupied territories. Palestinian representatives in Jerusalem are to meet with Secretary Baker tonight for the second time in 2 days. Another team of UN inspectors is in Iraq looking for evidence of nuclear weapons. All Iraqi weapons of mass destruction are to be eliminated under the terms of the Gulf War ceasefire. Last month, a separate team of inspectors spent 4 days in a Baghdad parking lot, refusing to turn over documents and pictures to Iraqi forces. Today, the leader of that team testified on Capitol Hill about their findings.
This was a long-range program. It was backed by significant institutional, manpower, and financial commitment. It had technical vision and direction that if it had proceeded unhindered by the Gulf War, would have resulted in Iraq, in a relatively short period of time, joining the ranks of nuclear weapon states. Based on evidence gathered during the 6th inspection, Iraq would not have been satisfied with a simple or crude device, but was already planning for weapons of increased power and sophistication.
Among those weapons, a thermonuclear bomb, according to UN officials. For the first time since the U.S. announced sweeping nuclear weapons cuts, NATO defense ministers are discussing the disarmament race in Europe. Ministers opened a 2-day strategy session today in Sicily.